What's up guys, JS2Cents here, and on today's edition of Stuff You Can't Buy, we're going to talk about the RTX 3060 Ti. EVGA is proud to announce their all-new XR1 OBS certified 4K capture card. Record at 1080p 60 while you game at 4K 60 with HDR, with advanced pass-through mode that allows you to switch to 144Hz refresh rate at the press of a button, meaning no longer do you need to disconnect or disable to get the full capabilities of your display. To see the full list of capabilities and configurations, click the EVGA link in the description below. So today we're going to talk about the 3060 Ti. It launches tomorrow. So in terms of the launch season for 2020 being complete garbage for everyone involved, whether it's Intel, AMD, or NVIDIA, at least you're going to get some information before you decide whether or not you want to try and go and get your hands on it. So it's kind of interesting because the 3060 Ti obviously alludes to the fact that there's going to be a 3060 non-Ti. Otherwise, they would have just called it a 3060, just like they called the 3070 a 3070. And then they called the 3080 a 3080. There still could potentially, it's so much heavier. It's like the same weight like this. Anyway, it's funny because everyone that kind of expected the next SKU, scratch it, that was gonna launch was gonna be a 3080 Ti of some sort, or a 3080 Super, or a 20 gig variant. Nope, we're working our way down the product stack as we typically do with NVIDIA, down towards the mid-range. It's essentially a cut down RTX 3070. It's the same GA104 core. It's got 4864 CUDA cores versus the 5888 of the 3070. 152 TMUs on the 3060 Ti, 184 on the 3070. They both have the same 8GB GDDR6, 256-bit bus, but of course, because of the different amount of CUDA cores and the clock speeds being slightly higher on the 3070, the teraflops on the 3060 Ti are a little bit lower. It is still a low watt part versus the 3080. It does still use the same 12-pin that NVIDIA has really like quadrupled down on when it comes to, and I say quadrupled because we now have 4 cards that use them. So that means if you're running aftermarket power supply or something and you have custom sleeved cables, you're gonna have to use the ugly adapter unless you go with one of the aftermarket companies now that are making cables for this. It's interesting though because the 3060 Ti comes in at $399. It's a $400 card. That's $100 less than the RTX 3070. So I'm curious as to what the stack between them is going to be in terms of the performance differential to see whether or not you should just spend the extra $100 and get a 3070. I mean, theoretically. But before we get into the benchmarks though, I want to point out something I think is kind of interesting. So it's clear that the 3060 Ti is just straight up silver. There's no pigment added to the anodizing on this whatsoever, which I have to say, I really like the way this looks. Better than the 3080, the 3090, and the 3070, personally. The 3070, as you can see, is definitely more of a gunmetal color, significantly darker than the 3060, but in terms of the dimensions, it is exactly the same. In fact, I have a feeling that there's a piece of dust in there. But when it comes to the PCB and the water blocks, I bet you they're gonna be identical, to be honest. I have a feeling the 3060 Ti and the 3070 are the exact same PCB. If we were to take it apart, you'd probably see the layout be identical. Remember, it is just a slightly shaved down GA104, exactly the same. But the 3080, if you look at the color of it, it's a completely different color than those two. And then the 3090 is actually a slightly different shade as well. So I don't know if this is just intentional, but what we got to talk about is the performance. So when it comes to the benchmarks, here's what we compared it to. We compared it to the 2060 Super because they are the exact same entry price point. When the 2060 Super debuted, it was $399. This is $399. We compared it to a 2080 Super. When it comes to the 2080 Super that I used though, and the reason why we're using that is because NVIDIA is claiming that it is basically trading blows with the 2080 Super. Yeah, that kind of sucks for anyone that adopted a 2080 Super, huh? Having a 60 series card now potentially beat your card. We are using the EVGA Black, which is a blower card. So I basically put these fans up a little bit higher to make them match the temperatures that we had with our 2080 Super. The reason why I don't have the 2080 Super Founders Edition card to compare is because if you don't recall, when I did the Destiny 2 build for our friend Mark, I put the only 2080 Super FE card I have in there, and now when I needed it a year later, I don't have it. That's why I don't sell and give away cards that often, people. They don't just sit on that shelf looking pretty. They look pretty until I need them. And then I threw the 3070 in there. Again, like I said, it's only $100. It's $100 more MSRP if you can get your hands on the Founders Edition cards to see whether or not it's worth just jumping up to the 3070. No 3080 in there. We only had it here on the table for the color reference to show you the difference in the anodizing. Okay, I've talked long enough. Let's go ahead and just cut right into the benchmarks. I have no idea what the music's gonna be, but I want Phil to use something different this time rather than the, head-banging rocker music like we normally do. He used the wrong music, didn't he? That's besides the point. So as you can see, the claims really do hold up, that it is pretty much just as fast in trading blows with a 2080 Super as the 3070 was supposed to trade blows with the 2080 Ti. So you can see, basically, the performance on this generation is just like one whole notch higher for the same price point, minus the 3080 not costing $1,200. But as you can see, it's doing a fantastic job at beating the first generation of RT. Some of the tests, if you look there closely, the 3060 Ti falls just a tiny bit short of the 2080 Super. But if it's an RT title that has both RT on and off, it's funny because then the RT performance catches or is slightly ahead of it. And the reason for that is even though it has less CUDA cores, or less CUDA cores and less Tensor cores and RT cores, this is running the second generation RT core and third generation Tensor cores. So if you were an early adopter of the RTX platform, you really did pay a premium to be an early adopter to the generation that really proved to everyone that RTX was something that they actually care about. When I look at Twitter and I look at social media, and we're gonna go into the whole part of the video now about whether or not it's worth it to buy. And again, this is massive theoretical because you can't just go out and buy it right now. Wait until next year is when we're finally going to see things maybe sort of normalize in inventory. I don't care what NVIDIA says, no one is prepared for the amount of demand there is across the board right now on PC stuff. I don't care who you are, you're not prepared. You're gonna run out. What's funny is this time around when you look at social media and the comments about these graphics cards, you hear people start to talk about RT performance. Well, I want a 30 series card because it's way better at ray tracing than a 20 series card. Or even comparing to AMD. You'll hear, and we are gonna do a 5700 XT versus this, but I think we have potentially a mid-range RDNA 2 card coming, so I don't necessarily want to compare these two yet because it is brand new NVIDIA versus last gen AMD. It's a really weird time. But I see people saying they're going to buy NVIDIA because of two reasons. One, the DLSS 2.0 performance, doing an amazing job at upscaling lower resolution to give you the perceived native resolution, but without the performance hit, especially when titles that use DLSS and ray tracing. But the amount of people saying they're buying NVIDIA because NVIDIA has better ray tracing performance than AMD. However, if you go back just 2 years and look at the comments of when the 2080 Ti launched, the amount of people saying nobody cares about RT, it's a gimmick, it's never going to turn mainstream, no one's going to give a crap. The entire time I said, everyone said the same thing about rasterization. Everyone said the same thing about shadows. And look at where we are now. It only took 2 years for me to basically be able to say, I told you so. But with all that said, it's kind of nice to be able to see a mid-range card giving us really good performance of the, and I know people are going to say mid-range, Jay, what the heck are you talking about? The 60 series is the mid-range when it comes to NVIDIA's stack. I don't know if they're going to have a GTX this time around. But to have a $399 card give you the same basic performance in rasterization and then slightly better RT performance than what the previous $800 graphics card cost, that's a win. I think no matter how you look at it. Theoretically, if you can get it in stock without the scalper price. So there's not a whole lot to talk about. I'm not going to draw this one out very long. The 3060 Ti, it's here. We need to see what AMD's answer to this card is going to be that's on current generation RDNA 2. You should have absolutely no doubt in your mind there's going to be a 6700 and a 6600 series. There's going to be, absolutely. However, with how botched the AMD launch went as well, I don't know how many people are holding their breath right now that that's going to be coming anytime soon. So we've got all these cards that only us spoiled YouTubers have got our hands on. And I'm not going to call it a paper launch. I'm now dubbing all of these launches parchment bombardments. Just sounds more sophisticated, if you will. Anyway, what do you guys think about the 3060 Ti? Would you buy that? Would you buy a 3070? Hold out for what AMD's got? Or who am I kidding? No one's going to be able to buy it. Comment down below what you'd buy if you could. That's $100 less than the 30... wow.